Ship prefixes have been around for centuries. Many have come and gone. Lost to history, others died off because they simply became outdated. Few survive in widespread use today. Those for civilian ships being MV for motor vessel and MS for motor ship. And of course, Navy prefixes that have often stayed the same since the beginning of that specific Navy, as is often, for example, the US Navy's USS, that's United States to the country, and then just ship. So, without further ado, let's get into my top 12 favorite ship prefixes. And coming at number 12 is motor vessel, more commonly known as just MV, is one of the most common prefixes used on ships today, and that is why it is here. It is common and fits modern ships nicely. Sure, it doesn't have the prestige or a long history like so many others on this list, but MV will always be, in my view, one of the longest lasting civilian ship prefixes by the time it is finally phased out. It also helps that the MV, formerly CCGS Nemeo, carries the prefix today as a research ship on Lake Winnipeg. And I love her. After all, Nemeo got me into ships in the first place, along with another that I'll mention in the number 1 spot. So, let's move on to what comes in at number 11. There are 2 variants of HMS, depending if it is a king or a queen. Currently, it stands for His Majesty's ship, but when it was Queen Elizabeth II ruling, it was Her Majesty's ship. This stands for Canada, Australia, and New Zealand's Navy's HM prefix as well. HMS has such a long, fascinating history and has been on some of my favorite ships, mainly Hood, Ark Royal, and Belfast. However, it has more recently been a symbol for defense cuts and broken aircraft carriers. For example, the Queen Elizabeth just had a minor fire on board 2 hours ago. They're still more reliable than the Russian carrier, but that's the low bar. I'm looking at you, Admiral Kuznetsov. Looking at you. This has dragged it down as the British government has been commonly cutting defense spending. Seriously, Canada's even headed down that path, and that is saying a lot. Now, with the British out of the way, and I love the British, coming in at number 10... United States Coast Guard, or USCG for short, is always followed by another letter depending on the type of ship. For example, it can just be S if it's just a normal ship, or, let's say it's a cutter, it will be C. But for this video, I'll just use USCG as it works to sum up all of them together. This prefix has a long history, including during World War II, and did so much more than they originally planned to do. And I love that history. However, unlike HMS, which has been dragged down despite its history, USCG doesn't share that same fate, which is why the prefix is a spot higher than HMS. If it has history, I'm going to like it, especially with them going against the U-boats in World War II off the American coast. But coming in at number 9... His Majesty's New Zealand ship, HMNZS for short, is the prefix for the New Zealand Navy, which is currently my 3rd favorite Navy, so that definitely has an effect on the ranking. Sure, the Navy is small, and it has always been a small but mighty Navy, which of course is my favorite type. And the prefix fits the styles of ships. Considering New Zealand's location, the Navy will always be well funded compared to others, Royal Navy and Royal Canadian Navy, and the name has a bright future. Well, unless New Zealand finally decides to become part of Australia, which, in Australia's constitution, New Zealand can actually do whenever it wants. But I don't think that will happen anytime soon, and if it does, it won't be in the near future, or even within the next few decades. Coming at number 8 is a prefix of the neighboring Navy. His Majesty's Australian ship is a prefix for the Australian Navy, and is HMAS for short. I like it for the same reasons I like HMNZS, so I won't repeat them, but I prefer HMAS, however, for one simple reason. They had tribal-class destroyers, which are my favorite destroyer, in fact, my favorite military ships of all time. And of course, New Zealand never had a tribal class. What can I say? Hell of destroyers. My World of Warship fleet says so. And coming in at number 7, United States ship, USS for short, is one, if not the most recognizable Navy prefix of all time. The name isn't going anywhere, unless, of course, there is a nuclear war and there aren't any ships or navies left. If you mess with a ship that belongs in the American Navy, or even worse, if it's an allied country or an American registered ship, you'll have a carrier strike group on your doorstep. USS is by far the most intimidating ship prefix of all time. After all, they have 11 carrier strike groups. And has been on some of the most famous Navy ships of all time. There, of course, are the many USS Enterprises, USS Arizona, and of course, USS Missouri BB-63, also known as Mighty Mo, along with many others. The history, the notoriety, along with the ships that carry it past and present, make the USS rank at number 9, and yet 6 are somehow still higher. And coming in at number 6, firstly, SS can mean two different things, sailing ship and steamship, but for the video, both are included here as they have the exact same reasons. The Age of Shipping Atlas, like most, covers both meanings of SS. A big plus is that the Manitoban riverboats carry the prefix SS except for a few of the last ones. It was one of the most widespread and one of the few to adapt a new type of ship, that going from sailing ship to steamship. These, along with the history, make me fascinated with any ship that carries the prefix, especially, of course, the Manitoban riverboats. Yeah, if it has something to do with Manitoban riverboats, it's probably going to rank high on a favorites list with me. And coming in at number 5, Canadian Coast Guard ship and Canadian Coast Guard cutter, CCGS and CCGC, belong, of course, to the Canadian Coast Guard, which, of course, I live in Canada, so will always be guaranteed to be in the top 5. I've always loved the Coast Guard, and that includes the prefix that the MV Nemeo I mentioned earlier is formerly Canadian Coast Guard ship Nemeo. And currently, of the 3 Coast Guard ships to ever serve on Lake Winnipeg, they're all still around. Vakta will reach her 21st year in service this year in 2024, and she is the youngest and is still in active service. Nemeo, of course, is around 50 years old, and she's still in service, but with the Lake Winnipeg Research Consortium as a research ship. Finally, the oldest, and was originally a fisheries ship, at about 111 years old, is the Canadian Coast Guard ship Bradbury. And she's a museum ship at the Marine Museum of Manitoba in Selkirk, Manitoba. These all influence the prefix of CCGS/CCGC as my 5th favorite of all time. And coming in at number 4, now, PS, or paddle wheel ship, is often referred to as just a paddle wheeler instead of the actual PS prefix. However, it's high on this list not because of the Manitoban riverboats, as none actually carry the prefix, despite a lot of them being paddle wheelers, including 2 of the last 5 built. It is because of the paddle wheels down under in Australia that I just happened to randomly bump into online one day, and I plan to do a series on them at some point in the future. I've always loved paddle wheelers. There's just something about them. I don't know if it's charm or what it is, but there's something that I have always loved about paddle wheelers. And even though they didn't all carry the PS prefix, I could go on all day about the prefix and paddle wheelers as a whole, especially the Manitoban paddle wheelers, but we do not have that kind of time. So, coming in at number 3, before I get too ahead of myself with this one, Royal Mail ship, famously known as RMS, ranks in at number 3, is the most known even among non-ship fans, mainly thanks to the Titanic. The lifetime rivals White Star and Cunard had all of their most known ships carry the prefix, and yet there is only one left in service today, Cunard's RMS Queen Mary II, with 2 others preserved, both Cunarders, the first Artemis Queen Mary, which was also the first Cunard Queen, and the Artemis Queen Elizabeth II, which replaced the Queen Mary and the Queen Elizabeth. QE2 was then replaced by Queen Mary II, so they all actually tie in together quite nicely. I could go on, but I actually wrote out that part of the script, unlike the paddle wheel one, and it was gonna minimum triple the video length, so that was a no-go. However, how did RMS come in at number 3? Well, that will become clear when my favorite prefix is revealed. And coming in at number 2, and somehow isn't in first, is my second favorite and my favorite military prefix of all time. I am sure His Majesty's Canadian ship, HMCS, for short, comes as no surprise to any long-form content viewer on my channel. But the surprise that HMCS isn't first. I love the Royal Canadian Navy, and of course my favorite military ship, and tied for my favorite ship of all time, HMCS Haida, carries the prefix along with many of my top 10 favorite ships of all time. I'm looking at you, Athabascan 1, 2, and 3. I would explain more, but that sums it up pretty nicely, along with the history, of course. And despite the Navy's current Halifax frigates kind of falling apart, at least their replacements are on the way in the relatively near future. Well, the shipyard that is supposed to build them built the Arctic patrol ships, which are, breaking, and the oldest and least ship of the class, HMCS Harry DeWolf, will be entering its third year of service here in 2024, and it's had many issues. Get it together, Navy. Just get it together. Yeah, the Navy is a mess, but that doesn't change anything here. But at least it will make an interesting video in the future. But what prefix tops HMCS and all the others on this list? Now, I have publicly said I don't like the upcoming ship prefix. However, since then, a lot has changed, as that was a few years ago. Especially when I found out ships that I love so much just so happen to carry the name, even though it's not widely known. You might have noticed a modern ship prefix that was missing from the list, but it didn't miss it. It made it. So what is this ship prefix? Well, the ship prefix I'm referring to is none other than that's right. Motor ship, more commonly known as MS, is my favorite ship prefix of all time. And for a handful of reasons, all of them currently residing in Manitoba before their eventual scrapping or sinking in some cases. Plus, 5 Manitoba riverboats are the main examples of this. The Lady Winnipeg, her larger sister, the River Rouge. The Lord Selkirk II, the largest ship built between Toronto and Vancouver. Paddle Wheel Queen. And last but certainly not least, my favorite ship of all time, tied with Haida. Of course, it's the Paddle Wheel Princess. Sure, I don't like the prefix for most ships, as MV suits them better in my opinion, but for smaller lake riverboats, especially the Manitoban riverboats, I could go on all day about them, as it fits so well. However, I'll save the Manitoban riverboats for many other videos, as I'm sure that series will eventually hit the 100 video mark in a couple of years. Thanks for watching, everyone. I hope to do more of these favorite lists in the future, and more Manitoban riverboats are definitely on the way. And I have several big videos planned for 2024, along with a special video that comes out on Sunday, April the 14th. I will be posting a video that Saturday, but it will not be a normal ship video. It will just be Battle of Warships or World of Warships or something like that. But I won't spoil it, as I've already dropped enough hints. I'll see everyone in the next premiere. And once again, thank you for watching, everyone, and leave your guesses down below to what you think that special video coming out on the 14th is.